Okay, we are recording now.
Awesome. For those who are joining in, welcome to our final summer webinar session, Bridging Evidence and Experience Diversity in Engineering in Action. It'll be presented by my colleague Allie Landy and myself, Matthew Chin, and we welcome you to this webinar. So, the goals for today during this webinar is to reflect on diversity in engineering, review some insights available from research, discuss and process those insights from some personal experiences, and provide some tangible ideas and calls to action. So just a little behind the scenes, if you have not met us through emails or through previous webinars, we have our engineer in residence team, our engineers of tomorrow team who run the engineer in residence program and have been helping you out. Erica Lee Garcia and Becky White, our CEO, and then myself, Matthew Chin, and Allie Landy, who are both co-op students from the University of Waterloo, are on the team this summer helping get everything up and running. So we'll start off by bridging theory to outreach. This is someone who we will be pulling from, Dr. Stephen Spencer. He used to run the Self-Stereotyping and Societal Norms Lab at the University of Waterloo. He has a large focus on women in STEM, especially engineering students, and is partnered on outreach strategies for a diversity webinar in 2016. And just some acknowledgements as we are going through the presentation. We'll be pulling from a few people. Dr. Crystal C, who is PhD. She does educational research, or she's an educational research associate at the Center for Teaching Excellence at the University of Waterloo. She's a PhD in social psychology from the University of Waterloo. Her specialty is evidence-based interventions that address different social issues, and has an interest in increasing the performance and representation of women and minorities in the fields where they are underrepresented.
So to get things started today, we'll start with a bit of an open reflection and a chance for you to share some of your experiences in the chat. So have you been part of any efforts to improve diversity in engineering? Have they been successful? And how do you know? Or if you'd prefer, you could respond to, how do you feel about the lack of diversity in engineering? How does it affect you personally, and what does it mean to you? So we'd love to share and hear some of your experiences. So I'll get us started. I know for me, just starting out as a university student, I was very lucky where my engineering program has almost a 50% female and male split. So it's not something that I ever noticed. But I remember being at an open house first term with a bunch of high school students, and we had a parent come over to us whose daughter was considering our program, and he looked at us and said, "How does it feel to be one of the only girls in your class?" And the group of us were all very shocked because it's not something that we often felt in our class, and we expressed this to him, and he seemed genuinely shocked that our program was very similar, and especially in the people that would always show up to class, we found that it was predominantly female. So it wasn't something that we noticed, but transitioning to co-op work terms in the workplace, it's something that myself and lots of my classmates have experienced, and we've been the only woman in the office, kind of seeing how that lack of diversity plays a role.
Mm-hmm. And Jeremy noted that at the university he attended, there are some bursaries offered specifically to women pursuing these kinds of studies. 50% of the cost covered, and that's true. We do see that in our universities there are scholarships available for minorities and women specifically pursuing this kind of education.
Mm-hmm. Matthew, do you have any thoughts?
I as well entered into a program that has a fair split in terms of gender gender division. It's pretty cool. I don't think it's 50-50, but it does have a good split in terms of male to female ratios. Yeah, so, and then other than that, there's a lot of, in my program, especially at the University of Waterloo, there's a lot of diversity in terms of racial population as well for engineering. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And Armand has comment, the lack of diversity in engineering firms often puts managers in the spot. This problem, as we all know, has roots in exposure in childhood. However, I find managers spending more and more time trying to solve a diversity problem that could be completely out of their hands. Yeah, it's very true.
That's very true. And later on, we'll talk about some of those interventions and ways that the EIR program can help specifically with that exposure in childhood. So we'll move on now. These are just some good questions for you to reflect on as you kind of consider your role in engineering. So we'll start with a few notes on diversity. So when we refer to diversity, we mean any group that has traditionally been underrepresented, such as women or visible minorities, but this could also refer to certain personality types, socioeconomic diversity, place of origin, as well as gender or race. So the main takeaway and something we're going to talk about more throughout this webinar is that we can't just stay neutral. We need to take an active role in encouraging and valuing diversity within the profession of engineering and within many other STEM fields as well.
And why focus on diversity? So given our goal to effectively attract and retain diversity, we would like to know how to do it. We trust in science, in this case, social psychology, and we want to put into practice what has been discovered in scientific research, just as we do as engineering and eng tech people.
So our hypothesis on diversity in engineering at Engineers of Tomorrow and the EIR program is that the engineering and technology professions will benefit from a more diverse perspective and makeup, and we will be able to solve more complex problems with a more diverse set of inputs, experiences, and skills, and we will be better able to serve society when we reflect it. So our society is very diverse, and having that represented within our profession means that we are better able to serve society and tackle our problems. Adding equality and access to opportunity as fairness and justice and is imperative for success for engineering and their mandate. And diversity is being invited to imparty. Inclusiveness is being asked to dance. So this comes from a TED Talk by Verna Myers, which points out a great idea where diversity is being invited to a party. So if there's a big party and you're invited, there's maybe a diverse group, but being inclusive is about more than just being invited. It's about being asked to dance and being more involved. So Verna Myers has a great TED Talk that we would encourage you to check out if you are interested. And I wanted to point out in the chat, Brian made a very great point that needs to be addressed when talking about diversity is that just because a group is a minority does not mean that the group is not well represented. And that's a very good point to make as well, that diversity isn't just about minorities, it's about the different ways that groups are represented. So when we look here, we can see that the total labor force is almost 50% women and 50% men, and yet we do see specific gender gaps in certain professions, such as the physical sciences, computer professionals, and of course, engineering. So this is a photo of an engineering class that can be found on Google. And if you take a look at it, you'll see that there aren't many women. There's maybe not as much diversity when it comes to ethnicity or race. And this is not uncommon even today. I've seen very similar photos walking around the University of Waterloo. I know me and some of my friends were wandering campus and we found one of our professors in her graduation class, and there were only 5 girls in her mechanical engineering cohort that year. And that really stood out to us as something shocking, but it is something that is not gone today. So, this is a look at the University of Waterloo's um, female enrollment by program for the engineering programs as of 2012. So, a quick look, you can see that architecture and environmental are right around that 50% mark, but there are some that are as low as 10% in computer and electrical. So it does vary quite a bit. This is a more recent look. So as of last fall, you'll see again architectural and biomedical are right around that 60%. And we go all the way down to much closer to 15% in computer and mechanical. So overall, there is a 30% enrollment, which is up 9% from what it was in 2012. So as we see, there's more gender parity, but not necessarily evenly across all programs or groups. So when we look at some of the stats on women in engineering, which you can check out at onwie.ca, they have some great statistics you can look into. As of 2017, there were 6,612 women enrolled in engineering across Ontario, compared to over 25,000 men. 14% of the engineering faculty across Canada are women. There's 1,562 women enrolled in first year engineering across Ontario in 2017, and 12.8% of professional engineers are women across Ontario.
Awesome. And then there are many different types of stereotypes that we can think of when considering stereotypes, and some of these pictures represent them. That often we can find that older adults, we can assume our stereotype is that they don't necessarily have the capabilities as everyone else and can't actually function the same. People with glasses are necessarily smarter than others, and that girls can't do math.
So when we look at this specific stereotype that girls aren't good at math, we can actually see it perpetuated even in the kind of clothes that are marketed towards girls. So there's some shirts here that say allergic to algebra, I'm too pretty to do math, and things like this. And I know for me growing up, I was always interested in math and science, and most of the shirts that I was interested in could only be found in the boys section, because the girls section would often have shirts that were more like this.
And I know that when I was younger, looking into Lego, I would play with not necessarily not necessarily a blue box instead of that pink box, but different style Lego that was not necessarily marketed specifically to, or I guess, sorry, most of it was marketed to boys, but even when you look into the Lego store, there are specific marketing to girls, often packaged in blue and pink boxes, and there's a focus on houses, on the characters themselves, on different quote unquote girly things, and you see these in the toys that we play with as well.
Mm-hmm. So this is an example here of Teen Talk Barbie from the early 90s. So she had a voice chip and would say some phrases, and one of the things she would say is, math class is tough. And there was a lot of criticism for this, and eventually the talking chip was changed to remove this phrase. But as a young girl hearing that, you might think, oh, maybe math class is really tough. Oh, I'm a girl. I don't need to do well in math because it's hard, and things like that.
Now I'd like all of you to imagine for a moment that you're giving a presentation in front of your class for the first time. You're nervous, your palms are sweating a little bit, and right at the beginning of your introduction to the topic, you stumble through your words and you have to correct yourself a few times before moving on to the rest of your presentation. You look in the audience and you start to think that maybe some of your classmates are giggling or looking at you differently. Is it because of your accent? Is it because of what you're wearing? From that time onwards, every time you do any kind of public speaking, you fear that you will be judged through a negative lens. And then that anxiety that you feel and being judged through the stereotype of not being able to speak properly in public might affect other areas in your life that are important to you, such as meeting new people, finding a new job, and we call this stereotype threats. Being concerned that your own behavior can be interpreted by other people as confirming a negative stereotype, and it can undermine the performance of people in stereotyped groups. Now, have you ever felt under pressure and that pressure made you choke, quote unquote, in your performance? That could be school, it could be in sports, it could be in anything. This choking experience is similar to when a person feels stressed while writing a test. It makes it hard for them to concentrate on answering the questions right because they're so anxious. Another relatable example might be walking into an exam that you studied really hard for and then blanking. I know I've done this, and it really is not fun when you're in a 400 person, 500 person exam and you can't think of what to do.
Mm-hmm. So we'll provide a bit of evidence to support this idea. So there's a study that was done in 1999 that took male and female participants, and one group was told that the math test they would be given historically shows gender differences. So it shows that women tend to perform lower than their male counterparts. So this would invoke a high stereotype threat within contestants. And another group was told that there were no gender differences in the past. So this would invoke a lower stereotype threat. And for the outcome, we'll show here the results of the scores. So what was found was that when women were told that the test had specifically shown that women were worse at math than men, they tended to perform lower on the test. Whereas when there was sort of a clearing of the air and the idea that this stereotype had not been shown to be true in the past, women actually performed better on the test.
Yeah, and these studies show that the losses of stereotype threat are real. It affects it undermines performance. It triggers concerns about belonging. It lowers engagement and retention. People feel isolated and participate less, and then they ultimately leave, and it can even threaten health. Now I want you to first imagine, again, two runners running a race. They complete the preliminary race in the same amount of time, but one runner is wearing ankle weights. In the final race, the runner removes the ankle weights. Who do you think will win? Now the runner with ankle weights should win because that person has more running ability, even though first performances were in equal time. One did it with external pressure of weights holding him or her back. This type of situation arises more often than you think, not with ankle weights, but with other external or environmental pressures holding back people's performance. Women and minorities have stereotypes about their abilities that can undermine their performance. So their performances with these pressures in place actually underestimate their true ability. If these pressures are removed, they perform even better. Further evidence that speaks against people's theories that women or African Americans just don't have the ability to do well in math and in school. Researchers at Waterloo and Stanford looked at test performance under stereotype threat or under reduced threat from data and over 15,000 students in 5 different countries. This shows us that our assumptions about women or visible minorities having less ability is false. When we remove the biases that affect their performance, and these would be the weights on their ankles, they perform every bit as well or better. So we know that this gap is worth working to close, because when we lose the performance of those students, we also lose their contributions to the engineering profession. And this could represent new designs, new inventions, new improvements to processes, new ideas, lost opportunity, lost engineering projects, lost new inventions. You as an outreach leader, specifically in our program, have the ability to start changing this and taking those ankle weights off of those students.
So we have another opportunity here to have a bit of a discussion, maybe reflect on some of your experiences. So you can share any thoughts you're having in the chat and we'll read some of them out. So have you ever experienced a stereotype threat? When, with who, what happened, how did you feel? Or how did you feel learning about these systemic factors that are holding back our efforts to make engineering inclusive and equitable? Is there any part of you that's resisting these insights at all? We'd love to hear what you think. Matthew, do you have anything you'd like to share to get us started?
I think that in my experience as half Chinese person, and I went to a majority Dutch school, there's a big expectation that because I was Asian, that I needed to perform well in math and science, and because partially because I was good at it, but just because of the stereotype of Asians in general. And that I found when I was younger had a big effect on me going into tests or different things like that, especially getting poor grades back. You feel like you've let not necessarily yourself down, but you feel that other people will look down on you specifically because of the stereotype which they've set to you.
So I know for me, when I was younger, I started playing basketball pretty competitively, but my town didn't have a girls' team or a girls' program at all, so I was playing with the boys. And they would constantly be telling me, like, oh, you're just a girl, you can't play as well as us. And that always made me feel like, yeah, they're right. Like, I'm just a girl. I can't do as well. So I definitely felt a lot of pressure with that. And eventually, what happened was I started to not really care about what they thought. I started pushing myself harder to do better. And I remember very clearly one day I was helping scorekeep with some of the boys at my middle school. And we were scorekeeping one of the girls' games. And they said, oh, I hate watching the girls play basketball. They're so bad at basketball. It's no fun. And I was sitting right there and I said, hey, that's pretty rude. What are you talking about? And they said, oh, not you, not you. You're different. You've proven yourself to us, which really made me stop and think how deep this problem is and all these stereotypes that are built into our society, where even me proving myself didn't change these perspectives of what a girl could do and how that stereotype would play in. I see Rebecca has put in the chat many times she's been the only woman in a boardroom, and it can feel really intimidating to speak up, which I think is definitely a very good point, and especially when you're told that maybe being assertive would make you too bossy, you might feel very intimidated to stand up. So these are definitely some good things to reflect on in your own time and sort of think about how stereotype threat has played a role in your life. So now we're going to move into talking about some interventions specifically for K to 12, so the EIR program and how teachers and engineers can work with students to sort of change these patterns that we've been seeing. So the first thing we'd like to talk about is having role models and mentors. And what this means is having mentoring opportunities that happen naturally with female or minority leaders and facilitators. So what can you do? Wherever possible, you could let women and minority leaders lead activities, and address your event participants. It's not necessary to mention why, and you can speak about your own diversity. So, having mentoring opportunities from other women and being exposed to female role models can be very helpful for young students. Seeing that diversity and seeing themselves in different careers is very important. If all they ever see are male engineers coming into the classroom and talking, they don't have that same connection and role model where they could see themselves in that role.
And another point is girly role models can actually backfire. The trend to try to make role models more girly, like a computer engineer Barbie, for example, can backfire. Some research shows that exposure to a feminine STEM role model can actually decrease interest and confidence in STEM in the middle-aged female students. Science and femininity seem antithetical, sorry, and being both feminine and successful in STEM may seem too out of reach and demotivating for girls. Rather than when girls can relate to the role models, see something in common with them, it has a positive effect. For example, 8th grade girls had more positive attitudes about scientists after meeting female scientists with accomplishments and with lives outside of work. So what that means is that accentuating girly things to try to appeal to girls can affect it negatively. And what you can do is choose relatable role models with accomplishments outside of work, and whether you can be that for yourself or whether you can do that for them or show them an example is an effective way to give them that role model.
Mm-hmm. So, another intervention that works well is reconceptualizing intelligence and ability to have more of a growth mindset. So, what this means is emphasizing the importance of effort, persistence, and gradual improvement over time instead of immediate results or innate ability. And this helps to make a safer environment. So, the idea that intelligence is fixed and you either have it or you don't, same thing with any talents or specific skills. Can be really damaging. So, having more of a growth mindset where you focus on growing talent and hard work and motivation, and how hard work is more important than what you may have initially, can be much more positive and can help uh, decrease these gaps that we see within groups. So, what you can do is share your own stories of failure and recovery. If you are in a classroom and you seem like this perfect person who's never failed in life and always got incredible grades, and now here you are, that can be a lot harder for students to relate to if they maybe aren't doing as well in their classes, but they're very interested in certain topics. So, you can mention the importance of continuing to improve and grow your brain. So, this idea that you can keep learning and growing and doing new things. So saying keep trying, working hard, and you'll get it is a very good tool as well. Just having that idea that if you work hard, you can get there. You can also say everyone makes mistakes in the beginning. And again, that goes back to sharing your own stories and having that idea that maybe you don't seem to have this talent, but if you work really hard, you might be able to get there as well. And you can ask, what can you learn when things don't go well? So, for students, especially, they're always very curious. So, if you give them a project and maybe it doesn't go the way they were expecting and they're upset about that, you could say, well, what can you learn from this experience? What things didn't go well and what would you change in the future? And that's that idea of having a growth mindset and really focusing on improving in the future.
And another way that you might, and I wouldn't necessarily first think about, is to set high standards and then give the assurance that these standards can be met. And what that means is high standards indicate that students will not be judged, that they are capable of reaching these standards. Research has shown that conveying you have high standards for people and that you're confident that they can meet these standards leads to an increase in motivation, performance from your perspective as a mentor. So you want to convey to students and employees that you have high standards, but that they can also meet these. So what you can do is don't give up on the kids who don't get it right away. Encourage them, but don't change the task for them. Say something like, I know this is a challenge, but I know you can do it. This can be, very helpful in their persistence and eventually the accomplishment that they feel and receive once they do complete this. And Rebecca said something very interesting. She likes to tell kids that engineers love failure because it helps us figure out ways to make our designs even better. And that is true with scientists and engineers, anyone in STEM, improving, allowing the opportunity to improve process and to make something better is what we want and what we strive for. And lowering the bar can actually have the opposite effect. Yeah, it can lowering the bar for someone can demotivate them and give them the confirm that they need the bar lowered.
Mm-hmm. So another intervention is showing that you value diversity. So what this means is that being colorblind or gender blind or ignoring any issues or gaps that you see actually discourages different minorities and women and different groups. So what you can do is show diversity in photos and promotional material that you're using. You can talk about encouraging, embracing, and valuing diversity. You can say things like, we need everyone's contributions, join us, there is a place for you, and using inclusive language to help show that everyone is valued and that there is a place for them in engineering or any profession they choose.
And model respect for women and minorities. What that means is when men or majority group members show respect for women and minorities, participants perform better. And what you can do is have equality when in sharing, have women and minorities speak, lead, or co-lead whenever possible, and listen when they speak. Ask women and minorities for advice or help in front of your audience. Be inclusive in whatever you're doing and try to have diversity in the people that you're talking to, answering questions from, and receiving advice or help from. And take-home messages for outreach leaders. Your participants may experience stereotype threat during one of your outreach events, and you can reduce or eliminate it with wise psychological interventions. Being precise, subtle, brief, and having generated generated by participants when possible. So this could take effect in your classroom visits, in your lessons, and you want the best thing that we can do is be aware of it and take those steps to address it and deal with it.
So here's a bit of a summary of some of the strategies that we've covered and strategies you can use. So you can provide positive, relatable role models and examples, set and keep high standards, promote a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. You can demonstrate how diversity is valued, and you can model respect for women and minorities.
And if you'd like to read more, here are some resources and references that we have found to be extremely useful when learning about and applying this diverse and inclusive messaging that we've been talking about. And you can find all of them on the slide.
If we want to take a look at some interventions in action, this is a great look at how you can help foster a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset would be things like I can't do that, it's good enough, this is too hard, I don't get it. And you can change that thinking to I'm going to train my brain in math. Is this really my best work? I'll use some of the strategies I've learned. This may take up some time and effort rather than saying things like I give up, and understanding that mistakes help me improve. So, with students, especially young students, having these ideas put into their head, and as Rebecca's pointing out, this is from her daughter's classroom. But for young students, this is a great way to sort of change their mindset to be more focused on growth and trying new things.
Some final thoughts. Your contribution matters, and so does your energy level. The work that you're putting in is not in vain. It doesn't have a minimal effect. You might not be able to see it directly or recognize it, but what you're doing in the classrooms has a huge effect on individuals and on people's idea and mentality around STEM and their idea of if it's possible for them to go into this kind of field. You are not alone, and we are all dealing with our biases. And then we want to give a huge thanks to our advisor, Dr. Crystal C., for sharing the work of her self-stereotyping and societal norms group at the University of Waterloo, and for allowing us to share these insights with the broader outreach community, which is all of you. And then some final invitations. We encourage you to sign up for our newsletter for more updates and you can hear our different stories and things we're thinking about. And those are weekly, every few days. Learn more about our engineering hat tools for teachers, and that is available on our website. Learn more about the EIR program. You can learn more about that through eir.ca and going on our website. And then send us an email. You can send us an email if you have any questions or would like to talk to us. Find us online at eir.ca and engineersoftomorrow.ca, and then follow us on our social media pages for updates and to hear our stories. And then also connect with us on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group for the EIRs, and that's a great way to share the positive experiences that you've had, different lesson ideas that you've come up with, what works, what doesn't. Connect with fellow EIRs, especially ones in your region, and get support and hear positive stories. Thank you for helping us inspire the next generation of evolving engineers.
And so a final note we'll leave you on is this quote from Henry Ford: whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right, which really highlights that idea of a stereotype threat. So if you don't think you can do it, you're going to have a harder time doing it. But if you have that confidence and know that you're able to do it, you'll be able to do it. So if you have any other comments, now would be the time. If you have any questions, anything else you'd like to discuss, please feel free to send that in the chat. Someone asked to see the poster, so I'll just put that up here while we're wrapping up. So if you have any comments, please feel free to share them in the chat. since we don't seem to have much coming in the chat, Matthew, do you have any final things you'd like to add?
No, just a final thank you to everyone for listening and yeah, for tuning into this topic that the whole team at Engineer of Tomorrow really find at the forefront of our thinking when we are planning and preparing, and what we want for you all too.
Mm-hmm. And Brian makes a very good point in the chat about how this presentation really covers the challenges that women face really well, but there's a lot missing about how minorities face different challenges. And that's largely because this was adapted from studies that were done focusing on gender representation. So we are hoping in the future we'll be able to include much more. There's definitely a bigger conversation to be had with minorities as well.
Hi, everyone. It's Rebecca. Hi, Allie and Matthew. Hope you don't mind. I thought I would just chime in to say thanks again to everyone that's here. Thank you, Allie and Matthew, as well. And yes, just to follow along that thought, Brian, agree that there is a bigger conversation to be had. And a lot of the mindset at the moment tends to be focused around girls in engineering or girls in STEM, and we're big believers in having a bigger conversation. It's really about more than that. So love that you're thinking that way. And we, as Ali said, we are hopeful that we can catalyze that conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So it doesn't look like we have too many other comments, so I think we'll wrap things up here. Thank you all for coming today, and we'll have this available for you to refer to later as well.